I didn't know my home could turn into a place I was afraid to walk through, until I found myself sitting up in bed at 2 a.m., staring at the ceiling, counting the seconds between their laughter next door like it was a punishment I hadn't agreed to. The sound wasn't just loud, it was familiar. It was the kind of laughter my best friend used to share with me, back when we were 16, eating fries in a parking lot, promising we'd always have each other's backs. Now it was coming from my own house, through a wall that suddenly felt too thin to protect me from the truth. I had let the wrong person in, and she had taken over everything. I pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders, even though the room wasn't cold. My phone glowed in my palm, screen smeared with fingerprints, the time screaming in white numbers. I could hear the movie bass thumping like a heartbeat that didn't belong to me. Then Tina's voice rose above it, bright, confident, like she was hosting, like she owned the air. A door opened, a cabinet slammed. Someone, Ryan, I guessed, laughed again, too loudly, the way people laugh when they know nobody is going to stop them. I swallowed hard, because the worst part wasn't the noise. It was what the noise represented. I used to come home and exhale. Now I came home and braced myself. I used to walk into the kitchen and feel normal. Now I walked in and felt watched, judged, managed. I used to have a sister. Now my younger sister, Emma, barely looked at me unless Tina nodded first. And my older brother, Jake. He'd gone quiet in a way that scared me. He wore headphones even during the day, like silence was the only safe place left in the house. I'd tried being patient. I'd tried being understanding. I'd tried telling myself it was temporary. Tina had nowhere to go. She was my best friend. She would find her footing. But somewhere along the way, the lines blurred. My dad's house became our house. My groceries became communal. My Wi-Fi became her entertainment system. My boundaries became something she laughed at. That night, I stared at the darkness and realized something that made my stomach drop. If I didn't do something soon, I was going to lose my home, and maybe my family, to a person who was never supposed to be anything more than a guest. I'm Lisa. I'm 25, and until a few months ago, I would have told anyone, without hesitation, that I was the kind of person who avoided drama like it was a contagious disease. I don't like yelling. I don't like ultimatums. I don't like that tight, nauseating feeling right before a confrontation, when your mouth goes dry and you start rehearsing sentences in your head like a nervous actor backstage. I've always been the one who smooths things over. The one who says, it's fine, even when it's not. The one who cleans up first and complains later, quietly, to myself. The house I live in isn't technically mine in the way most people mean it. It belongs to my dad. Last year, his job transferred him to Florida, and he left the house in my name with one clear agreement. I'd manage it, keep it running, and make sure the rent and bills were handled responsibly, until he figured out whether he'd ever move back. Dad covers the mortgage. Everything else, the utilities, the internet, the groceries, when they became everyone's, landed on my shoulders. At the time, it felt manageable. I was working, I was stable, I had routines. The house was quiet, clean enough, predictable. Then I got laid off. 3 months ago, I remember sitting at my kitchen table with my laptop open and my hands shaking, reading an email that used the word restructuring, like it was a polite excuse for ripping the ground out from under me. I tried to stay calm. I told myself I'd find something else quickly. But bills don't care about your optimism. That's when Tina slid into my life like a solution. Tina and I have been friends since high school, the kind of friendship that grows roots. She knew my dad. She'd eaten dinner at our table. She'd sat cross-legged on my bedroom floor during breakups and finals and every messy in-between moment. When she broke up with her boyfriend, after living with him for 2 years, she called me crying and said she had nowhere to go. I said yes before I even finished thinking, because that's what I do. I help. At first, it really did feel like the perfect plan. Tina would move into one of the spare rooms. She'd help with rent. I wouldn't be alone in a 3-bedroom house while job hunting. We'd cook together, watch shows, split chores. We'd feel like adults building something stable. And for a while, it worked. The first few months, Tina was the version of herself I recognized. Considerate, funny, easygoing. If I washed dishes, she'd wipe down counters. If she stayed up late, she'd keep the volume down. If she borrowed something, she'd ask. We even had this simple system. Everyone contributed $50 every 2 weeks for shared groceries. It wasn't fancy, but it felt fair, like teamwork. Then, about 2 months ago, my sister Emma needed a place to stay. She's 22, young enough to be stubborn, old enough to be proud. She had issues with her college roommates and asked if she could move in temporarily. I didn't hesitate. She's my sister. And Tina seemed fine with it when I brought it up. She even smiled and said, "Of course, it's family." Around the same time, my older brother Jake needed temporary housing. His apartment building was undergoing major renovations, and he asked if he could stay in the basement room for a few months. Again, family. I said yes. And that's where the story changes. Like someone quietly turned a dial and the air in the house started thickening. Within days of Emma moving in, Tina's personality shifted so fast it left me dizzy. It was like she looked around, saw more people, and decided the only way to stay powerful was to stop being a friend and start being a ruler. She began speaking like the house belonged to her. She began acting like Emma belonged to her. And suddenly, Lisa, the girl whose dad trusted her with this home, felt like a guest in my own life. At first, the changes were subtle enough that I tried to explain them away. Stress, I told myself, new dynamics, too many adults adjusting to one space. But the truth has a way of repeating itself until you stop ignoring it. The first crack showed up in the kitchen. We'd had that grocery system in place for months, $50 every 2 weeks, shared food, no fuss. Then, Tina's boyfriend, Ryan, started staying over. At first it was one night, then two. Then suddenly his shoes lived by the door and his hoodie hung on the back of a chair, like he'd always belonged there. He never offered to chip in. He never asked if it was okay to eat our food. One night, I spent an entire Sunday afternoon making lasagna, the real kind, layered carefully, enough for all of us. I came home the next day and found the pan scraped clean, foil tossed in the trash. Jake mentioned casually that he'd been saving a slice for lunch. Tina just shrugged. "There's cereal," she said, like that settled it. That was the moment something in me tightened. I told Tina I wasn't comfortable subsidizing Ryan's meals anymore, and suggested we stop the communal grocery fund. Everyone should buy their own food. Simple, fair. She agreed, and then ignored it completely. She stopped contributing anything but kept eating everything. Food Jake paid for, snacks Emma bought, leftovers I'd planned meals around. If I said something, she acted confused. If Jake mentioned it, she laughed it off. Then came the cleaning. Tina loved to talk about how no one else does anything around here. She said it loudly, frequently, usually when Emma was nearby. But I was the one vacuuming twice a week. I cleaned the shared bathroom. I took out the trash. I even cleaned up after Jake until I finally had to sit him down and ask him to handle his own messes. Tina, meanwhile, left her dirty dishes in the sink for days. Once, I found a pot of pasta she'd forgotten on the stove, mold creeping across the surface like a warning. When I pointed it out, she rolled her eyes and said she'd been busy. Busy controlling everyone else, apparently. She started telling me when I should shower so I wouldn't mess up her schedule. She commented on what I ate, suggesting I watch my figure, her eyes lingering in a way that made my skin crawl. She expected explanations. Where I was going, who I was seeing, when I'd be back. The night I went on a date, she texted me constantly. "Where are you? Who are you with? When are you coming home?" When I returned, she followed me into the bathroom while I brushed my teeth, demanding my date's full name and phone number, just in case something happened. I told her no. She acted like I'd insulted her. The noise became its own kind of torture. Tina complained to Jake about his Xbox, claiming it disturbed Emma's sleep. Jake, sweet, anxious Jake, started using headphones even during the day. Meanwhile, Tina and Ryan stayed up until 4 in the morning watching movies at full volume, laughing like the house was a bar they'd rented out. If I dropped my keys in the hallway past midnight, Tina would storm out yelling about how inconsiderate I was. The social shift hurt the most. Emma, my sister, started siding with Tina. If I walked into a room where they were talking, their voices would drop. Their eyes would flick toward me, then away. Tina only spoke to me when she needed something. A ride, my laptop, my patience. And I could feel it. This quiet, poisonous narrative forming behind my back. That I was difficult, that I was controlling, that I was the problem. The house didn't explode into chaos all at once. It rotted from the inside. And somewhere deep down, I knew the truth I was avoiding. Tina wasn't just crossing boundaries. She was rewriting reality and turning my own family against me while she did it. The breaking point didn't come in a dramatic explosion. It came in a sentence. A small one, casual, spoken like it should have been obvious all along. It was a Tuesday night. I remember because I'd spent the afternoon submitting job applications, my head buzzing with rejection emails and forced optimism. I came home tired, not just physically, but in that deep, bone-level way that makes everything feel heavier than it should. The living room lights were on. Tina and Emma were on the couch, knees pulled up, whispering and scrolling through their phones. The TV was muted, but YouTube thumbnails flickered across the screen. Autoplay, like always. I hesitated in the doorway, then forced myself to walk in. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice light. Tina glanced up, smiled thinly, then looked back at Emma. They didn't answer. I went to the kitchen, opened the fridge, and froze. The groceries I'd bought 2 days earlier, gone. The chicken breasts I'd planned to cook. The yogurt. The leftovers I'd packed specifically because money was tight. All gone. I stood there longer than I should have, my hand resting on the fridge door, cold air spilling onto my bare feet. "Tina," I called, trying to stay calm. "Did you take my food?" She sighed loudly, like I'd interrupted something important. "God, Lisa," she said, walking into the kitchen. "It's not your food. We live together." My chest tightened. "We agreed we weren't doing shared groceries anymore," I said. "You said you were okay with that." She crossed her arms. Emma leaned against the counter beside her, eyes fixed on the floor. "You're being really intense about this," Tina replied. "You barely eat anyway." That did it. Something snapped, not loud, not explosive, but sharp. "No," I said. "I'm not being intense. I'm asking for basic respect." Tina laughed. Actually laughed. "Wow," she said. "You're acting like this is just your house." The words hung there. Heavy, deliberate, weaponized. I felt my pulse in my ears. "It is my house," I said quietly. "Dad left it in my care. I manage it. I pay the bills." Tina tilted her head, smiling like she'd been waiting for this. "That doesn't make you our boss." Emma finally looked up. "Yeah," she added softly. "Sometimes it feels like you act like you are." The floor shifted under me. I stared at my sister, my baby sister, the girl I'd driven to class when her car broke down, the one I'd baked a surprise birthday cake for, the one I'd defended my entire life. "Emma," I said slowly, "when have I ever treated you like that?" She hesitated. Tina stepped in immediately. "You're always making rules," Tina said. "You get mad about food, Wi-Fi, noise. It's like nothing we do is ever good enough." "That's not true," I said. "I've barely said anything until now." "Because you pout instead," Tina snapped. "You make everyone feel uncomfortable." My throat burned. "That's not fair." Tina rolled her eyes. "See? This. This is why living with you is exhausting." The room felt too small, the air too thick. I realized then, really realized, that this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a coup. Emma wasn't confused. She'd been coached. Tina had been feeding her a version of me that suited her narrative. Quietly, consistently, until it stuck. I took a breath. "We need to have a house meeting," I said. "All of us, tonight." Tina's smile disappeared. "What rules now?" she asked. I ignored the jab and texted Jake, asking him to come upstairs when he got home. The meeting happened an hour later, all of us sitting awkwardly around the dining table like strangers forced into a group project. I laid everything out. The food, the bills, the Wi-Fi usage, the noise, the boundaries. I spoke calmly. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. Tina denied everything. She barely eats the food. She doesn't use the internet that much. She cleans all the time. Emma's Xbox must be the problem. Emma nodded along. Jake looked stunned. After 20 minutes of circular nonsense, something in me hardened. I stopped trying to be nice. "These are the rules," I said, my hands steady. "Everyone buys their own food. Utilities are split. Internet use is reasonable. No controlling behavior, no exceptions." Tina agreed, reluctantly, dramatically. And for exactly 3 hours, I believed it might work. At 3 a.m., Tina and Ryan were laughing at full volume again. The YouTube stream played on her open laptop, unwatched, burning data. That was the moment I understood something painful and permanent. This wasn't about compromise, it was about control. And Tina had no intention of giving it up. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of the noise, though it was there, vibrating faintly through the walls, but because my mind wouldn't stop replaying the same moments on a cruel loop. Tina's smile when she said, "It's not just your house." Emma's quiet agreement. The way the rules I'd laid out had dissolved within hours, like they were never real to begin with. I lay there staring at the ceiling, my heart beating too fast for someone who wasn't running from anything physical. My chest felt tight, like I was holding my breath without realizing it. How did it get this bad? When did I lose control of my own life? I kept asking myself what I'd done wrong. Had I been too passive, too accommodating, too afraid of being the bad guy? I'd spent weeks, months, walking on eggshells, telling myself that if I just stayed calm, stayed kind, things would eventually settle. But kindness without boundaries wasn't kindness anymore. It was permission. The next morning, I woke up to find Tina's laptop still open on the coffee table, YouTube streaming endlessly to no one. I closed it gently, like it might explode if I slammed it shut. In the kitchen, dirty dishes filled the sink. Again. Empty snack wrappers littered the counter. Ryan's mug sat there too, untouched, like proof that nothing I'd said the night before had mattered. Emma walked in a few minutes later, eyes downcast. "Morning," she said quietly. "Morning," I replied, forcing my voice to stay neutral. She hesitated, then said, "Tina feels like you embarrassed her last night." I laughed once, short and humorless, before I could stop myself. "I embarrassed her?" I asked. "Emma, I asked for basic respect in my own house." She crossed her arms defensively. "She's under a lot of stress." "So am I said. "Why does that only ever seem to matter for her?" Emma didn't answer, and that hurt more than if she'd argued. Jake came upstairs later that afternoon. He looked tired, dark circles under his eyes, shoulders slumped like he'd been carrying weight no one else noticed. "I heard everything last night," he said quietly when Tina wasn't around. "You weren't wrong." Relief washed over me so suddenly it almost made me dizzy. "I just don't know what to do anymore," I admitted. "Every time I try to set boundaries, she twists it." Jake nodded. "She's good at that." That afternoon, I made a decision. Not a dramatic one, not yet, but an internal shift. I stopped minimizing. I started paying attention. I noticed how Tina only followed rules when someone was watching. How she spoke for Emma, interrupted her, answered questions meant for her. How she complained about me loudly, but never directly, always through someone else. That evening, I texted Tina and told her we needed another conversation. Just the two of us. She replied immediately. "Why? Didn't we already talk?" "Yes," I typed back, but nothing changed. She didn't respond for 10 minutes. When she did, it was curt. "Fine." We sat across from each other at the dining table. The same place. Different energy. "I need you to hear me," I said. "This isn't about control. This is about respect." She sighed dramatically. "You're making this bigger than it needs to be." "No," I said. "You're making it impossible by refusing to change." Her eyes hardened. "You know," she said slowly, "if you didn't act so superior all the time, people wouldn't push back." That word again. People. Not her, not responsibility, not accountability. "I'm not superior," I said. "I'm responsible." She leaned back in her chair. "That's your opinion." And in that moment, something inside me went very still. I realized I wasn't arguing with a friend. I was negotiating with someone who benefited from chaos, from confusion, from me doubting myself. I stood up. "These rules are not suggestions," I said. "If you can't follow them, we'll need to talk about you moving out." For the first time, she looked startled, then offended, then angry. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She smiled. "We'll see," she said. That night, lying in bed again, I understood something terrifying and clarifying at the same time. This wasn't going to end quietly. And if I didn't stand firm soon, I was going to lose more than peace. I was going to lose myself. The shift didn't happen overnight. It crept in quietly, through whispered conversations that stopped when I entered the room, through looks exchanged over my shoulder, through a tone that made everything I said sound like an accusation, even when it wasn't. If part 5 was me waking up, then this was the part where Tina realized I was no longer asleep. And she did not like that. The first sign was Emma. My sister stopped eating meals with me. If I cooked dinner, she'd say she already ate. If I suggested watching something together, she suddenly had homework, or a headache, or plans with Tina. She stopped texting me unless it was logistical. "I'll be late. Don't wait up. I'm studying." But she laughed with Tina. I could hear it through the walls. And every laugh felt like a small betrayal, even though I kept telling myself Emma was young, impressionable, stuck in the middle. Tina, on the other hand, knew exactly what she was doing. She started narrating my behavior out loud. "If Lisa gets mad about this, don't worry, I'll handle it. Lisa's just stressed because she's unemployed. Careful, the Wi-Fi police are home." Always said lightly, always said with a smile, always said in front of Emma. When I confronted her, she claimed she was joking. When I asked her to stop, she said I was sensitive. When I stayed silent, she acted like she'd won. The bills became the next battlefield. Utilities were due, and I texted everyone reminders like I always did. Jake paid immediately. Emma sent her portion that evening. Tina didn't. I waited a day, then another. When I asked her about it, she frowned like I'd insulted her. "I thought you were covering it this month," she said. "No," I replied. "We agreed everyone pays." She sighed. "You didn't make that very clear." It was clear. She was just daring me to say it again. Jake pulled me aside that night. She's pushing you on purpose, he said, to see how far she can go. I nodded, my jaw tight. Because I could feel it too, this invisible pressure, like a test I was failing simply by existing. The house meeting with Dad came a week later. I hadn't planned on involving him so soon. I wanted to believe I could handle this myself, but Dad had already noticed something was off during our phone calls. My answers shorter, my voice tight in a way it never used to be. So when he said he was coming to visit, I didn't stop him. The morning he arrived, the house felt like it was holding its breath. Tina came downstairs late, wearing a forced smile and a tone so sweet it made my skin prickle. Emma followed her, quiet and tense. Dad didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He reminded everyone that the house was his, that I was managing it, that this wasn't a free-for-all. It was a shared responsibility. Tina tried to argue. Dad calmly pulled up the router statistics on his phone, the ones I'd sent him. Over 70% of the data usage came from Tina's devices. She went quiet. When Ryan's overnight stays came up, Tina claimed he was barely there. Jake spoke up then, holding his phone out. A calendar, 15 nights in 1 month. Dad established clear rules, written rules. Everyone signed. Tina signed last. Her pen pressed so hard into the paper it nearly tore. For a brief moment, I felt hopeful. Then Dad left. That night, I heard Tina's voice in the kitchen, sharp, angry, careless. She's not going to do anything, Tina said. Lisa's too much of a pushover. Emma murmured something in agreement. My stomach dropped. I stepped into the doorway. They both froze. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I said one sentence. You have 30 days to move out. The words felt heavy, but right. Tina exploded. Tears. Accusations. Claims that I was heartless, dramatic, cruel. Emma defended her at first, saying Tina was just venting, that I was overreacting. But something had shifted in me. I'm done, I said calmly. This isn't a debate. The following days were unbearable. Tina alternated between slamming doors and pretending nothing had happened. She cleaned aggressively one afternoon, like it was a performance, then left messes everywhere the next day out of spite. Ryan stopped coming over. Emma stopped speaking to me entirely. Until the day we went to lunch, just the two of us. Away from Tina. That was when everything cracked open. Emma admitted that Tina had been feeding her lies from the moment she moved in, that I complained about her, that I didn't want her there, that I resented helping her. She showed me the messages. My hands shook as I read them. Small comments, subtle digs, carefully planted seeds. I felt sick. When we got home, Tina was waiting. She had gone through Emma's phone. She called Emma a traitor. Jake came upstairs during the shouting. He didn't raise his voice. He said, "You need to leave. Now." And just like that, the power Tina thought she had evaporated. She packed in fury, left in the night. The house went silent. And for the first time in months, I could breathe. But the damage was done. And I knew the story wasn't over yet. The silence after Tina left should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt hollow. Her car disappeared down the street, taillights blinking once before vanishing, and the house went unnervingly still, like a room after a fight where the echo hasn't caught up yet. I stood by the front door for a long time, my hand resting on the cold metal handle, listening for something that wasn't there anymore. No footsteps, no TV noise, no sharp laughter cutting through walls. Just me, and the weight of everything that had happened. Emma retreated to her room without a word. Jake went back downstairs, shoulders heavy, like he'd just carried something he never wanted to lift in the first place. I wandered into the kitchen and sat at the table where all of it had unraveled, where rules were dismissed, truths twisted, and loyalties tested. That's when it hit me. I hadn't just lost a roommate. I'd lost a best friend I thought I knew. I replayed years of memories, searching for cracks I might have missed. Sleepovers, late-night talks, prom pictures, inside jokes. How easy it had been to trust her. How eager I'd been to save her. And the darker realization followed quickly behind. I had been trained for this. By a lifetime of smoothing things over. By learning to accommodate. By believing that love meant endurance. That if I was just patient enough, kind enough, quiet enough, things would fix themselves. I went to bed that night exhausted but restless, staring at shadows on the ceiling, wondering how many times I'd ignored my instincts because I didn't want to be difficult. The next few days were worse than I expected. Tina texted me once, just once. "I can't believe you did this to me." No apology, no accountability. I didn't respond. But the message sat in my phone like a bruise I kept pressing. Emma barely spoke to me. When she did, her voice was polite, careful, like she was talking to a stranger she wasn't sure she could trust yet. I wanted to pull her into a hug, tell her I understood, that I forgave her. But something stopped me. I was tired of being the first one to reach. Jake and I existed in parallel, quiet meals, shared glances, unspoken understanding. He'd step in when he sensed my mood slipping, offering a coffee, a joke, a distraction. But even his presence couldn't fill the emptiness Tina left behind. Not because I missed her, but because I missed who I thought she was. At night, doubts crept in. Did I overreact? Could I have handled it better? Was I really as controlling as she said? Those thoughts were dangerous, I knew it, but they came anyway. I found myself second-guessing decisions that had been clear only days before. I hesitated before speaking, apologized too quickly, flinched when my phone buzzed. The house felt safer, but I didn't. The lowest point came when I found Emma crying quietly in her room one evening. She looked up at me, eyes red, and said, "I don't know who to believe anymore." That sentence broke something in me, because I realized this wasn't just about Tina leaving. It was about the fallout she'd created, the doubt, the fractures, the emotional wreckage she'd left behind without ever looking back. I sat on Emma's bed and listened, really listened. I didn't defend myself, I didn't explain. I just let her talk about feeling manipulated, embarrassed, confused. And when she finished, I felt empty. Not angry, not relieved, just drained. That night, I stood in the bathroom staring at my reflection, barely recognizing the woman looking back. I looked older, tired, like someone who had spent too long carrying other people's baggage. And for the first time, I admitted the truth I'd been avoiding. This wasn't just a bad roommate situation. This was a pattern in my life. And if I didn't change something, deeply, fundamentally, I would keep attracting people who took advantage of my silence and called it kindness. That realization didn't empower me. It terrified me, because it meant the pain wasn't over. It meant the next step, the real one, would require me to stand fully in my discomfort, without softening it for anyone else. The turning point didn't arrive with a dramatic confrontation or a perfectly worded speech. It arrived quietly, through evidence. Emma came into my room one afternoon holding her phone, her face pale in a way that made my stomach sink before she even spoke. "I think you should see this," she said. She sat beside me on the bed and handed me her phone. The screen was filled with messages from Tina, dozens of them, sent over weeks. I recognized the tone immediately. Subtle, concerned, poisonous. "I don't think Lisa really wanted you here. She complains about everything, not just you. I feel like she resents helping people, but won't say it out loud. Be careful what you tell her." I scrolled slowly, my hands trembling, not from shock, but from recognition. This wasn't chaos. This was strategy. Every message was designed to isolate, to position Tina as Emma's ally, while quietly painting me as the enemy. It wasn't impulsive, it was deliberate. "I didn't realize at first," Emma said softly. "She said she was protecting me." I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and saw how young she still was, how vulnerable, how easy it would have been to believe someone who spoke with confidence and certainty. "It's not your fault," I said. "That's how manipulation works." Something in Emma's shoulders loosened. We talked for hours, about what had been said, about what hadn't, about how quickly trust can be redirected when someone speaks first and loudest. For the first time since Tina moved in, Emma chose me. Not out of obligation, out of clarity. That night, after Emma went to bed, I sat alone in the living room, the same space that once felt hostile, and I let myself think clearly for the first time in months. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't controlling, I wasn't imagining things. I'd been manipulated, and more importantly, I'd survived it. The next morning, Tina texted again. "I need to come by this weekend to get the rest of my stuff." I stared at the message, my heart racing out of habit, then slowing. This time I didn't panic. I responded calmly. "Jake will be home. He'll help you." No apology, no explanation, no reopening doors that needed to stay closed. Jake handled the exchange when Tina returned. Civil, distant, controlled. She paid what she owed without comment, handed over her key, and left. Later that day, she asked if she could talk to me. I agreed, but only on my terms. We spoke on the front porch, no audience, no drama. She didn't apologize, not really. She explained, justified, named her insecurity, like it excused her behavior. I listened. Then I said something I'd never said to anyone before. "I understand why you did it, but understanding doesn't mean accepting it." Her face fell. For the first time, I saw her clearly, not as a friend, not as a villain, but as someone deeply afraid of being replaced. And that fear had cost her everything. After she left, I felt something unfamiliar. Peace. Not joy, not triumph, just peace. Over the next few weeks, the house began to heal. Emma and I cooked together again. Jake relaxed. We laughed, tentatively at first, then freely. The tension lifted in layers, like dust settling after a storm. We found a new roommate. Quiet, respectful, temporary. And I found a new job. Not just employment, but stability. The real turning point, though, happened inside me. I stopped apologizing for setting boundaries. I stopped explaining myself to people who weren't listening. I stopped mistaking discomfort for wrongdoing. I realized that being nice had cost me more than being firm ever could. And the most powerful part? I didn't feel guilty anymore, because I finally understood this. Standing up for myself didn't make me cruel. It made me honest. The consequences didn't explode all at once. They fell into place quietly, piece by piece, like a truth that no longer needed my help to be heard. Tina didn't come back for weeks after that final conversation. When she did, it was brief, transactional, stripped of the emotional theatrics she'd once relied on. Jake told me later that she barely spoke while collecting the last of her things. No accusations, no tears, just distance. And in that silence, something shifted. Emma showed me more messages Tina had sent after leaving. Long paragraphs alternating between guilt and self-pity, between I miss you and I can't believe Lisa did this. Emma read them once, then blocked her. That mattered more to me than any apology ever could. The house began to feel like itself again. Not the version I'd been tiptoeing through, but the one my dad trusted me to protect. The floor stayed clean. The fridge stayed stocked. The Wi-Fi stopped lagging mysteriously at night. Noise became accidental instead of hostile. Small things. Important things. Tina's version of the story, however, traveled faster than she did. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd been telling people I kicked her out without warning, that I was obsessed with control, that I chose my siblings over her like that was some kind of moral failure. For the first time in my life, I didn't rush to correct the narrative. I didn't call, I didn't defend, I didn't explain, because the people who mattered already knew the truth. My dad called a week later, his voice calm but firm. "I'm proud of you," he said. "You handled this the right way." That validation hit harder than I expected. I hadn't realized how much I needed it, how deeply I'd internalized the fear of being too much, of disappointing people by enforcing boundaries. Jake backed me publicly when asked. He didn't embellish. He didn't soften. "She crossed lines," he said. End of story. Emma did something even braver. She told people the truth. Not dramatically, not angrily, just honestly, and that changed things. Tina's parents stopped calling. Mutual friends stopped reaching out for both sides. The noise died down. A few weeks later, Tina returned with Ryan and 2 friends to collect furniture. Jake handled it. Tina paid what she owed down to the dollar, almost like she needed the closure of being even. Before leaving, she asked if she could talk to me. I agreed. She stood on the porch, shoulders tight, eyes guarded. She didn't apologize, not fully, but she acknowledged that things had gone too far, that she'd felt threatened, that she'd acted out of fear. I listened. Then I said the truth. "I don't hate you, but I can't trust you, and without trust, there's nothing left." She nodded, handed over the key, left, and that was it. The fallout wasn't loud. It was final. Life moved forward in quiet, solid ways. A new roommate moved in, respectful, reliable, invisible in the best way. Bills got paid on time. My job stabilized. I started sleeping through the night again. Emma and I rebuilt. Not perfectly, but honestly. We talked about manipulation, about how easy it is to believe the person who speaks first, about how loyalty can be twisted when someone frames themselves as the victim. We learned each other again. And something unexpected happened. I stopped feeling angry. I didn't wish Tina harm. I didn't hope she'd fail. I didn't fantasize about justice. I just let her go. Because the real consequence wasn't that she lost a place to live. It was that she lost access to me, to my generosity, to my silence, to the version of me who would absorb discomfort to keep others comfortable. And she knew it. The truth didn't destroy her reputation. It simply removed the lies propping it up. And in that space, I stood, steady, unshaken, no longer apologizing for protecting what was mine. 6 months have passed since Tina left. Long enough for the house to feel like a home again, not just in appearance, but in spirit. The walls don't feel tight anymore. The silence doesn't feel heavy. It feels earned. Emma moved out recently, not because of conflict, but because life carried her forward. She graduated, got a job in another state, and left with a hug that lingered longer than usual. We talk almost every day now. Distance, it turns out, can clarify love when manipulation no longer clouds it. Jake moved out too. He and his girlfriend found a place closer to work. We joke that the house is quieter now, but there's a warmth in it that wasn't there before, something stable and intentional. Dad officially transferred ownership of the house to me last month. When he handed me the paperwork, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't expected, not because I won, but because I had proven to myself that I could protect what mattered without losing who I was. As for Tina, we don't speak. She wrote once a long email acknowledging her behavior, naming her insecurity, taking responsibility without asking for forgiveness. I replied briefly, wishing her well. That door is closed, gently but firmly. And that feels right. I've learned something that took me far too long to understand. Being kind doesn't mean being available to everyone. Being understanding doesn't require self-erasure. And peace doesn't come from avoiding conflict. It comes from addressing it before it rots into resentment. For a long time, I thought setting boundaries would make me lonely. I was wrong. It made room. Room for honesty, room for respect, room for relationships that don't require me to shrink to survive. If you're listening to this and recognizing pieces of your own life, someone who calls your boundaries cruelty, who mistakes your patience for permission, hear this. You are not responsible for managing other people's insecurities at the cost of your own safety, sanity, or home. Sometimes standing up for yourself means becoming the villain in someone else's story. That doesn't make you wrong. It means you chose yourself. And for the first time in a long time, that choice feels like freedom.